Andrew, thank you for being on the Flying Free podcast. I'm so excited to have
Yes,
you here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm a fan of your work.
I am wondering if you could talk a little bit about, just introduce everyone to what it is what your soapbox is, basically,
Yeah,
and how you
yeah,
got
yeah,
there.
for sure, for sure. So I talk kind of the same things. I talk about grief and porn and kind of the healing journey, just the general idea of what it means to be healed. I'm an author and a therapist. Um, Grief and porn, why those kind of are my main things. Um, First, grief. I lost my son about 7 years ago, and we created a documentary and a book called A Brave Lament. And that's where we just have learned to journey into our hearts and fully grieve our loss, because we grieve to the level in which we love. And we radically loved our son, Brave. And so that really forced us into this grief work, which again, we would never choose. But it's similar to my journey with porn. I wouldn't choose this, but because of my own 13-year addiction to pornography and how it nearly killed me, I am now, in a sense, to have integrity now, it's to continue to face my own shame and continue to face the work that I work with countless amounts of men in facing their own violence and facing their own pornography, their unwanted sexual behaviors. And so that's where I find myself every day, kind of in those conversations and journeying with a bunch of men, how to become safe and better men.
Okay, well, and those two topics, grief and porn, those are hugely impacting topics on the women that I work with.
Yes.
Because
yes.
they are in marriages where they're grieving so many things, and some of them are getting out of marriages and grieving in a lot of different ways, in different layers of ways. And then many of them are dealing with porn addicted husbands or ex-husbands. So it's interesting because you said that your original focus was on men. You wanted to help men with these things, and yet we were talking a little bit before the show that you actually have found that your audience is largely now made up of women.
Yeah, what I'm realizing is that, I'm a bit of a unicorn as far as a man kind of speaking against male violence. I know Dr. Jackson Katz does a lot of that work, but I'm finding that men aren't super receptive to what I'm bringing, which is basically deal with your own broken sexuality, deal with your own propensity to violence. Men don't really want to do that. And yet, obviously, there are men. That's why I have a full practice. There are men who want to do that. And yet, I'm finding that women, especially women who are in relationships with these types of men, and the man that I used to be, are really connecting to kind of what I'm writing and what I'm putting out there, because I'm trying to write about the internal journey of recovering narcissistic evangelical man, which is what I was and at times still am.
Do you find in your practice that the men who are coming to you and wanting help, are they making progress? I mean, are they?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's why I have it, and I get in trouble with this, but I deeply believe in the goodness of men, which is, gets me in trouble in some circles because I'm not ready to just throw them under the bus. But because I work with men in such a front lines way, I see the glory and the complete depravity of these men. But yes, the men are fighting and learning what it means to love themselves, and also learn to love and honor women in a new way, which is incredibly hopeful for me. But it's also not normal as well. Like I'm very aware that is not kind of the normal posture of men to deal with their own issues.
No, it's not. Well, and then when you have an element of just deep-seated and ingrained denial on their parts, then it's very hard to get them even to say that they need help in the first place. So,
totally.
But I know, and go ahead.
I say I kick men out of my practice all the time.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, because it's just like, you're not ready. You're not ready for the work that I do. You're not you're too much. And I just tell them, you're full of yourself and you're not ready. I just kind of confront them and call it like it is. And and confronting that violence head on. But again, it happens pretty often that I'm just like, no, I'm not going to work with you. Because it does take this amount of humility. And normally it's after men have lost. It's normally after the wives have begun to get healthy and they have boundaries, because many times the wives are much more courageous than the men. And they finally begin to have boundaries. They finally begin to honor themselves, or they finally begin to leave. And then the men wake up and realize that they're losing everything. And then they're like, oh, I can't just, run over my wife. She actually has a sense of self. She actually starts, she's loving herself. She's honoring herself. And then the men wake up, and then they begin to outgrow their addiction. They begin to outgrow their narcissism only after, which sucks. But again, because the onus is still on the woman to do it. And yet I'm still hoping for men that they'll begin to rise up and not be just little boys in grown men's bodies.
That's beautiful. Okay, so when you are working with, I'm just so curious, when you're working with these guys, and let's say some of them are changing, do you also like talk to the wives too to find out if it's changing on the other side? And not
a lot of times
we'll bring behind closed doors,
Yeah. Oh yeah. A lot of times we'll bring in the wives, pretty regularly. You bring in the wives and do that work and do marriage work as well. We do it all. My wife and I, we do a lot of couples work together as well.
Okay. So is your wife also a therapist then?
Yes, she is.
Because I know I saw she has a book coming out too. And I was thinking, I need to get her on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, please do. Yeah, no, her book's coming out in like a month or so. And the theology of the womb, knowing God through the body of a woman. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book. So she's a fireball. She's awesome.
That's great.
She keeps me going.
I need to meet her.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the whole idea of porn, because the topic of this podcast episode is the intersection of porn and domestic violence.
Yes.
So why don't you talk about how those two things go together? Why they go together?
I feel like porn is so culturally ingrained. We don't even know, like, we're saturated with again, our churches, our government, like everything has become pornified and sexualized. So I think it's so that way. It's become so normal that we don't even see it, right? When you think of 70% of Christian men, using pornography, I have a stat here: 8 out of 10 between ages 18 and 30 view pornography at least monthly, right? 57% of pastors, 64% of youth pastors. Like, those statistics are wild, right? In our churches. And so if nearly 60% of pastors are using pornography, how do you think they're going to unconsciously treat women?
Exactly.
Right? Like, how are they going to unconsciously, they don't even realize they're doing it, but they're going to, make sure they leave the door open, or they're going to make sure they tell women to dress conservatively and don't show. They're going to blame the women because of their own unresolved shame that they are frauds, that they have a secret life, right? And pastors are so isolated and a lot of times so narcissistic that they don't get help, right? And then they project onto the women, right? So of course you're not going to see women preaching from the pulpit. Of course you're not going to see women on the board, because I want women as far away from me because they remind me of my own shame. Get away from me. I actually hate you, right? And I want to devour you because I need you.
No wonder we run into problems then when we try to get help from these men for our husbands.
Exactly. That's why the gaslighting is so crazy, right? And that's because you think these men are going to help you get out of this, and they're actually, and again, it's unconscious. I don't think these pastors aren't bad guys.
Yeah.
They're not even aware of the dynamic that's going on internally, because they're so unconnected to their own heart and to this own pornified society. But I think this has impacted us so greatly. It's created this unconscious misogyny, right? What does misogyny mean? It's the dislike or contempt for. It's an ingrained prejudice against women. It's an ingrained prejudice that's deep in the pastors, that's deep in our church, our evangelical society, right? And we don't even, like, they don't even know it. And so this misogyny, like porn, leads to this misogyny that creeps into our marriages, right? And so these men that I think probably a lot of the women that you are working with, this misogyny is so ingrained in us. I knew that my mom was supposed to serve me as I watched football, right? Me and my brother, like it was just ingrained in me that she is meant to clean the kitchen, or like these really deep things that I grew up being entitled, that somehow because I had a penis that I had more power in my own home than I should have. So that's where I think we have to realize how ingrained the patriarchy is, how ingrained the misogyny is, and that porn has really seeped in to the men in our culture.
What can we do as well? I'm thinking of even being a mom. When you said that about your mom being in the kitchen, I'm thinking, that's what I do. So what can we do to help our boys not to think that way?
Yeah. You have to do, in a sense, you have to go above and beyond, because the culture, the church, so much of it screams sexism, right? We raise little sexist unconsciously, right? And so we just have to really be proactive in what does it mean to honor a woman? What does it mean to, the more just be aware of our language, right? We have to be aware of our own internalized sexism. What do we still believe? I remember I sent my son, he was like 3, 4 at the time, to a little bit more expensive school. And then 2 years, preschool or whatever, where he's learning Spanish, and, it's like tons of money for 3 days, like a whole mortgage payment. And then I'm like, my daughter, a couple years younger, so she grows up and it's time for her to go to preschool. And I had this thought, no, I don't think I want to send her to this school. And I was like, wait, what? And it was almost like this internalized sexism, that I'm more willing to send my son to this expensive school, but my daughter, she's going to be okay. I realized there was something in me that I projected on the little girl that I didn't project onto my boy. And it was just like, I still have sexism that's unconscious. Are you willing to name that for you as a mom? Then you can begin to engage children differently. You can begin to engage your sons in different conversations, because I don't think it's a one-time conversation. It's 1,000 little conversations about how we treat, about gender, about equality, all these things. We just have to be talking about it all the time.
I feel so. I have kind of 2 separate families. I have these older kids. I have 9 kids. So I have these older kids that are, upper teens and up to 20, almost 26. And then I've got, my youngest is 7. I have a 7-year-old, 9-year-old, and 11-year-old. And I am raising my younger kids differently, because I raised my older kids in the patriarchy. And my younger kids, so I'm remarried. One of the beautiful things about my husband is that he just naturally, he's so not sexist at all. He's the exact opposite of sexist. So he's so naturally, after we're done eating dinner, he will help clean up. He doesn't help me make dinner, but that's because he can't cook. He was a bachelor his whole life. And he ate frozen thing. I don't know how he did that. That sounds so gross to me, but he cleans the house, he does the laundry, he cleans the kitchen. And my little boys, my 7-year-old, 9-year-old boys, see this on a daily basis.
So you're already
very different.
Exactly. You're already teaching them just by the way you live.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But I don't know. So if my husband wasn't like that or didn't take initiative with that, I think I would still fall into those roles and just do it. I mean, that's just my knee jerk. It's how I was raised. It's how I've spent my whole life. And it would be really hard for me to have to say to my husband, do you think that you could maybe wash the dishes so that you could, I don't think I could do that.
For sure.
So, anyway.
For sure. And I know for me, I mean, I still, again, it's like I can default to kind of laziness around the house, or laziness with the kids.
I'm going to be interviewing your wife. I'm going to be interviewing you someday, and I'm going to talk to her about.
She'll expose me.
I'm just kidding.
She'll expose me pretty quick. It's much easier to talk about than to live. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know that is true. Okay. So, so we've talked about how they come together. Porn is, well, actually, we haven't really covered that much. How would you say that porn affects my audience? My women are dealing with emotional abuse mainly and spiritual abuse. So God, they're saying, their husbands or their are saying, well, God says this, so therefore you have to be this way. So that's a very shaming thing, because most of the women I work with are very devoted followers of Christ.
Right.
They have strong and mighty faith. Okay.
Yes. Right.
These are warriors. And the last thing that they want to do is do anything that would shame their Savior, or would do anything that would cause them not to be a stellar example of a good Christian woman, you know?
Right.
And their husbands and their churches know this, and they use that as leverage against them. So when you were talking about the fact that so many pastors are using porn, like all these light bulbs are going off in my head, and I'm thinking, I think I'm a super naive person.
Yes.
And maybe a lot of us Christian women are. Maybe we just assume.
Well, we don't. What I found in working with women is like a lot of women don't want to know the truth, because the truth actually has really dire consequences.
It does.
Like it does. And so I would actually rather be naive and not feel the pain than know that my husband, you know, is cheating on me regularly and masturbating to other women's breasts. Like, no thanks. Like, I don't want to know what he does at night when I go to bed, because it hurts too bad. And that's where it cycles back into the grief of, we have to have the courage to live in truth, because God is truth. And the more we live in truth is the more we experience God. Like that's it. Like, that's it. We have to live in truth, no matter if you're on the receiving end of these, you know, horrific betrayals, or if you're the man and the, you know, the perpetrator. Like, you have to live in truth. We have to enter fully into these truthful conversations for liberation to be possible.
So, you know, I think our culture, though, says that pornography isn't that bad. So, but how would you, I mean, from a biblical standpoint, would you say that pornography is a form of adultery?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so. Whenever we make somebody an object, right? An object, objectification, I believe we're stripping the image of God from their face, because they no longer bear God's image. They're just an object for me to get off on, for me to use, right? And so much of pornography has taught us to make women as objects and no longer human, no longer, you know, part of the Imago Dei, bearing the image of God. That they're just there for my consumption. They're just bodies. And that is where I feel like so much of, you know, the Christian faith of when you can objectify someone into no longer being human, you can do whatever you want to them. Right? That's where the violence comes in. That's where, you know, the manipulation, like, you're no longer a person. You're no longer a person. You're just there to serve me. And my church says that for you to submit to me. My culture says that, you know, and so everything, in a sense, I think, is against these women. That's telling them the exact opposite.
So what would you, there's a couple of things to piggyback off of. I'm wondering if you can share maybe some things that a woman could look for so that she doesn't have her head in the sand.
Yeah.
And then also, and then secondly, what can she do about it? If she did find out.
Yeah. And so the main thing, which again is is difficult, but it's brokenness. And it's not just this humble kind of this, oh, I got caught and I'm so sad, but it's this brokenness that actually leads to life change. And it's actually, I'm going to go seek help. It's not you looking up marriage therapists. It's not you working so hard and finding the right books to give him. It's him getting off of his lazy behind in seeking out help. It's him saying, I'm going to pay whatever it takes. And I'm going to go fly out to Seattle and work with Andrew because whatever, right? Whoever you find to work with, like, I'm going to go do this to save my life.
Do
because
people
I want to
actually
save
come
my
out
life.
to you to do you have like a weekend retreat, or how do you do
that? Yeah. I've got a lot of intensives, people fly in from all over. And this week we're actually launching our new a new business. We're going to be called the Christian Counseling Center for Sexual Health and Trauma. So you can find that this week. We're launching that. And so, but yeah, people fly in from all over. But yeah, especially men that want to, they get caught cheating with their wives. I mean, that's the norm, right? Or couples. My wife and I work with a lot of couples who are kind of at their last leg. But yeah, basically it's initiative on his part to say, I'm ready to be a different man. And you're going to see it through my actions. My words are no longer, like, I'm not going to give you pretty words. I'm actually going to live it out, and you're going to see. And to me, that's kind of the only thing, is it's going to be in his actions. It's going to be in how he lives. It's going to be in the books he reads. It's going to be in the therapist he pursues. It's going to, like, that's the stuff that really is going to show a life changed.
Okay. So I'm wondering, though, I think you maybe thought my question was the signs of his repentance, but I'm actually wondering, that was great. That was all really, really good stuff. Okay. I'm actually wondering, if a woman is like me and totally naive and doesn't, like, I don't want to know, just.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Now let's say that she's listening and she's going,
yep.
Oh boy, I wonder why my husband does stay up late at night. I wonder if, like, what can she, are there signs that she can,
gotcha.
Some of the signs that someone is actually doing that?
Yeah, that's a different answer than the one I gave. I would say, like, back to the kind of living in truth, like, be straight up, just literally, like, face it head on. And if he's
just come out and ask him?
I would, yeah.
Will they say, but they'll just say no. I did. I asked my ex and he was like, no, I have not used pornography.
Sure. Which is probably a bunch of bull, right? Like, again, all I'm saying is you don't need to live hidden because he's living hidden. Your job is to be the most authentic, right? And I would say say, hey, babe, I'm actually really concerned. I heard these statistics today on this great podcast that 70% of men are using pornography, 70%. And I want to talk about it with you. What's your story of pornography? What's your story of sexual development? We've never really talked about that. I'm scared. And he could be full of it. But you're leading with vulnerability and courage. You're leading with your own fear. You're saying, hey, I want to talk about this more fully because it's an epidemic. How are we talking to our kids about, because here's the deal. We're not going to talk to our sons about it, right? Or as fathers, if we're using,
right?
We're going to be so ashamed of it. We're going to be so hidden. We're not preparing our kids how to engage pornography. Talk about sexuality in a healthy way without shame.
How do you engage your kids about pornography? I'm sure their dad's not doing that. I know that for sure. So and it is something that I want to talk about with them.
Yeah. I mean, exposure now is around 8 years old. Like, it's crazy how now with everybody with phones in their pockets, younger and younger kids are getting exposed to hardcore pornography all the time. And so what I encourage people to do is you're talking about it all the time, and not just pornography, but I start with bodies, right? So we're talking about our bodies. We're normalizing our bodies. So my son is 2, and he starts touching his penis everywhere. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we're in the grocery store and he's just masturbating in the grocery store. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So first I feel shame. First I feel, terror. I'm looking around and then I'm like, okay, I don't want to shame my son, but how do I engage him? He's only 2. And so I at this moment I handled it well, but I looked at him and I said, hey buddy, do you see anyone else touching their penis in the grocery store? And he looks around. He says, no, daddy. And I said, okay, well, that's something that we do, at home in our bedroom or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, we're talking about penis, we're talking about his body, we're talking about how to use his body appropriately, right? Without the shame. Oh my gosh, don't you do that. Your body's bad. because then it just goes underground, right? Then it just goes hidden. And I don't want to create that hiddenness. That is what it was for my story, that I just went underground with my shame and my sexuality. So I first want to normalize sexuality. And we talk about our bodies. We talk about it with our daughter, our vagina. We're open about our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leads us to these conversations. Again, it's not just one birds and the bees talk, but it's hundreds of talks about our bodies, about what's appropriate. How do we use our bodies? There's a great resource called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. And that's a great talk for younger kids, a great book for younger kids, to talk about pornography. And, there's good pictures and there's bad pictures, but it doesn't make you bad. But there are appropriate pictures to look at. So those are just a few things off the top of my head.
Okay. And we'll put a link. I'll find that and put a link to that. Is that something they can get on Amazon?
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's say that their husband did say, yeah, I do struggle with that sometimes. And there's a lot of women listening to this that already know their husbands use it.
Yep.
If their husband isn't, I mean, the story that I hear from a lot of women is just that, well, yeah, it's kind of like the emotional abuse thing. My husband says he's going to stop and he makes an effort for a while and then he goes back to doing it. And it's just kind of this cycle that keeps going around and around and around. What else can a woman do? There's really not much that she can do. I mean, it's not her body. It's not her choice.
Right. But again, if she has a poor relationship with herself, she's not going to require much.
Okay.
She's not going to require much. She's not going to require fidelity. Right? She's not going to require we need help. Like, we need to do something about this. I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay with you being with other women.
Right.
I actually love myself enough to require more. And so it really pushes back to, what is your relationship with yourself? What is, how have you come into relationship with yourself? Because anytime I work with women who have a history of DV, we first start with their relationship with themselves. Because normally, what we hate is what we require of others. In that sense of if I hate myself, I'm going to bring that. I'm going to require that of others to hate me as well, right? Our self-contempt draws more contempt.
That's profound. There's a lot of women listening that that's going to be a huge light bulb for them.
Good. Huge. Yeah. Yep. And if I have a healthy relationship with myself, if I love myself, then I'm going to be in relationship. I'm going to require that from my partner.
Yeah. But see, we've been brainwashed. Most of us have been brainwashed with the idea that you can't, to love yourself. When I hear that, I know I talk about that all the time now, but what comes up in my mind is everything that I was brainwashed with, that is selfish, that is not Christ-like, that's not biblical, that's a bunch of psychological mumbo jumbo. And yet that has been the key to my healing, really.
Yep.
Has been turning and seeing myself as just as valuable, because I see other people as valuable, but I don't see myself as valuable.
Totally. And that's where we've confused in the Christian world. And I write a lot about this, in my book, Stumbling Towards Wholeness. But we've confused humility with self-hatred. Somehow we think that hating ourselves is humility, and it's the opposite. I think self-hatred is actually quite prideful, because we make it all about ourselves, right? Yes. We make it all about ourselves. But humility is not self-hatred. It's actually knowing my depravity and knowing my glory equally. I am a good man, but I also know that I'm capable of great darkness. And I've done a lot of great darkness in my past. I've done a lot of horrible things, and that's in me. And yet I'm a good man, and I can hold both. That's going to make me not too prideful, and it's going to make me not too self-contemptuous.
Right. And when you know that, bringing the God factor into it, when you know that you're safe in Christ and that he loves you with unconditional, never failing love, then you are more free to get your eyes off of yourself and off of your shame and look at other people and not be afraid of failing or
Exactly.
making mistakes or saying something wrong, or, you know, just being terrified in your
Yes.
interactions with people, because you're free to love them. And even if they
Exactly.
reject you, you haven't lost anything because you went into it offering love.
Yes, exactly. Well said. Yep. And a few other, I think, points for women who maybe find themselves either in relationship with a man who might be using porn, or, you know, just kind of questioning it. One, I want, like, trust your gut. I feel like women have such a adverse relationship to their bodies, right? Because of whatever stories and culture. But like,
Mm-hmm.
your body is good. Trust your gut. Trust your
Mm-hmm.
God lives in your body. Jesus Christ is
Right.
in you. Like, trust your gut, right? If you feel betrayed, it's probably because you have been, right?
Yeah.
If you feel like he's being secretive, it's probably because he's hiding something. Like, trust your gut. It doesn't mean you need to go, you know, confront him and accuse him, but like, talk about your fears, talk about what's going on for you.
Yeah.
You know, trust your gut. And then the second part is like, it's also not your fault if he is using. So many women, you know, turn on themselves, and that's back to the self-contempt piece, that somehow in the church can reaffirm this a lot of times. I've heard it over and over again. Well, just be more sexual. Well, just
Yeah.
give him more sex. Do what he wants sexually. Wrong. It's not your fault that he has no integrity. It's not your fault that he's a sex addict. Something's not wrong with your body because he likes airbrushed women with fake breasts. That's not your body. It's not your fault. It's his brain damage. That's the problem.
Right. Well, and from your perspective coming out of that, if your
Mm-hmm.
wife had been, you know, had gone overboard and trying to be more attractive or whatever in the ways that you were seeing on
Mm-hmm.
on a computer screen, would that have
Mm-hmm.
made a difference anyways? Would that have made you go, oh yeah, now I
Yep.
don't need the porn anymore?
Yep. It's never enough.
Yeah.
It's never enough, right? That's the thing about sexual addiction. It never suffices. I'm always want more, right? I always want more. I always need something kinkier, something darker, something, right? And it gets darker and darker and like, it's never enough. So no, it does not matter if you scratch that itch right now. I'm going to have a new one tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything else
Yeah.
that you wanted, that you had for women?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, you know, I made this point before, but like, his integrity is not up to you. You know, the term differentiation, right? Where it's like, you actually separate from him. You know, you don't need to be intertwined with him. As far as if he has a lack of integrity, like, that's on him. That's between him and his relationship with God. Like,
And
a
that's
healthy
actually,
you.
oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yep.
Finish that thought.
No, yeah, just a healthy you is actually what's most important, right?
Yeah.
To having a healthy relationship.
And I think I think that in Christian circles, though, we've been taught that when you're married, that the idea of one flesh means that you are enmeshed.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know, that
it
you
becomes
bear one
codependent.
another's
Right.
responsibilities, and he's
Yep.
responsible for your sin and you're responsible for his, and
Yep.
it's so unhealthy.
It's so twisted, right?
Yeah.
And it's not what marriage covenant means.
Right.
It's actually, you know, the healthiest relationships that I see is not when two kind of half wounded people get together and try to make each other whole. Like, those are
Right.
actually really toxic relationships. The healthiest relationships are when I know who I am and you know who you are, and then we come together, and, you know, it's messy still, but we make concessions, we barter, we live into our fullness with each other. That's very different than just kind of two broken people trying to fix each other.
Right. Okay. We're going to wrap this up, but I want you to tell us what is something that when you look ahead to 2020, what is something that
Mm-hmm.
you're looking forward to, or what is one of the, well, it sounds like you shared a little bit about a big project. You've got a launch coming.
Yeah.
Tell us a little
I
bit
think
more
it's to
about
be
that.
this week. Yeah. So basically, as you know, kind of the books have gotten out, and we've kind of gotten a little bit more popularity, we decided that we needed, you know, our counseling practice, we needed to expand it. So we're trying to basically grow our practice in a way that we do more just intensives and do more group work. because we're finding a lot of energy in that and kind of slowing down on the individual sessions. And so, you can find it in the next week at www.christiancc.org, and it's going to be called the Christian Counseling Center for Sexual Health and Trauma, and basically focusing on sexual health and trauma work is kind of our main focus. And we'll be doing intensives, marriage intensives, both in Seattle and North Carolina. So we're trying to expand. We're going to be trying to be in North Carolina in the summers, which is my home, and what I just miss it so much. So we're going to do kind of both, North Carolina in the summers and then Seattle during the year. And so we're going to be doing these intensives and group work mostly, and growing that part of our business is kind of that, and then continuing to sell our products. We have a film, we have quite a few books now out. So
I am actually going to Seattle tomorrow.
No way.
Coincidentally, I've never been there before. My husband's best friend lives out there, and we've been planning a trip we've been wanting to go out there for 2 years, but we're just going for the weekend, and I heard it's going to be raining the whole time.
Oh, geez.
I know. I'm so bummed because there's some beautiful things to see there.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah, my best friend's actually flying in from North Carolina tomorrow, and then we have our 10-year wedding anniversary on Friday, so we're going to be hanging out, but yes, it's probably going to be freezing and rainy, but that's awesome that you're coming out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's just funny that you're from there. You know what, too? I forgot one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and then we're going to wrap up. I wanted to ask about what you do with a woman or a couple when they come in and the husband just doesn't seem to be making progress. Do you support a woman if she decides that she just needs to get out of that marriage then and needs to be free? How do you handle a situation?
Yeah. I definitely encourage. I normally take the first step of a legal separation, right? Of kind of let's separate. Let's see if he does his work. Let's see if he addresses his issues. But if that doesn't happen, then yes, you have to do what you need to do to survive and to be healthy and to be happy. But yeah, I mean, I, again, work with a lot of kind of narcissistic men, and I kind of get a sick pleasure in confronting them. And so I take that on, pretty regularly, and it normally doesn't go too well, as far as they don't really like it, because people don't really take on narcissists, and because there's blowback. Right. And so there's been a few times that I thought I might get murdered, but it hasn't happened yet. But like, there's the deep violence that has to be taken on, that has to be confronted head on, and that's kind of what I do. And it doesn't, both people have to be willing. A lot of times I see the women willing to work on it, and I encourage them to do their work and to dive in. And yet a lot of times I encourage it to do it solo if the man's not willing to do it. But sometimes the man will get roped in and they'll fly out here, and we try to do some screening, and we might end up doing more of it, but sometimes it doesn't go too well because they're not willing to look at their own issues.
Right. The interesting thing about narcissistic types of people is that they're so predictable, and so you can actually have a lot of fun with them. I mean, when you said, I loved it what was the word you used? Did you say sadistic pleasure?
Sick pleasure.
Or sick pleasure? Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't. So sometimes I've interacted with some of these people on Facebook, and I just can't help myself. It's so much fun because you know exactly what to say to get exactly what they're going to say. If you say this, you know exactly what they're going to say. And sometimes it's kind of fun to play around with that. But I don't recommend it to my listeners. Please don't do that. It's not.
Yeah. No, you have to be in a different place, right? And I have a privilege as a man, right? Where even when we do couples counseling, my wife's engaging in the real time. They respond to me very differently than they respond to her, right? Like, I have a certain weight because I'm, more of a powerful man, that I can speak these really intense things to them in a way that they would just dismiss my wife.
Yeah, which is really sad, and also just an illustration of just
their hatred of the feminine.
Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful podcast. And I really appreciate your time, Andrew. And we'll have to have you
You're
back. And
welcome.
I wanna interview your wife too sometime.
Yeah,
Especially
please
when
do.
her book comes out.
Yeah, she's setting up interviews now, so I can give you her contact information because
Okay.
she's setting up for the book launch. So
That
perfect.
sounds great. All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yep. And have a wonderful weekend. Have a great 10th anniversary.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.